On my birthday, my mother-in-law joked, "Some families are sophisticated." This, try. The room laughed awkwardly. My husband was silent. I walked to the center of the dance floor and said something that made everyone turn pale. My mother-in-law chose my birthday to remind me I was not good enough. It happened right after the cake was brought out. 30 people in the room. My family. His family. Friends from both sides. My husband Daniel standing next to me with his arm around my waist like everything was perfect. Linda lifted her champagne glass and smiled at everyone. She said some families are sophisticated. Others try. There was a pause. Couple of people laughed because they thought it was a joke. My sister stopped smiling. My dad looked at his plate. Daniel did nothing. Linda looked straight at me when she said it. For context, this party was at the country club her family has used for decades. She insisted on hosting it there. She also insisted on inviting her circle. Women with matching diamonds and opinions. I grew up in a regular house in Phoenix. My dad runs a repair shop. My mom is a nurse. We are not sophisticated in Linda's dictionary. I waited for Daniel to say something. Anything. He squeezed my hand once and said relax under his breath. That was the moment something shifted for me. This was not the first time she had done something like this. At our wedding she controlled everything. The venue. The guest list. Even the flowers. She told everyone she paid for it all. My parents quietly covered more than half, but she made sure no one knew. I let it go because I thought peace was more important. But then something else happened at the wedding. Something I only found out about weeks later. And I had kept that information to myself. Until my birthday. After her comment, the room felt strange. People started talking over each other to kill the awkwardness. The band began playing louder. Daniel leaned toward me and said, "Do not make a scene." That was interesting, because I had not said anything yet. Linda walked around greeting her friends like she had just delivered a clever line. A few of them looked at me with polite smiles. One woman actually patted my arm and said, "You are lucky to marry into such refinement." Lucky. I looked at Daniel again. He was laughing with his cousin now. Completely normal. Like his mother had not just reduced my entire family to a punchline. I thought about the wedding envelopes, the gift table, the locked room at the venue, and the call I received from my cousin 2 weeks after the honeymoon asking why I had not thanked her for the cash gift she gave us. I had thanked her. Or at least I thought I had. That was when I learned something that made my stomach drop. Back at my birthday party, I watched Linda raise another glass. She caught my eye and smiled in a way that told me she believed she had won something. I put my drink down. If she wanted sophisticated, I could give her sophisticated. I stepped away from Daniel and walked toward the center of the dance floor while the band was still playing. The music slowly faded when people realized I was standing there alone. Linda stopped mid-sentence. And I said, "I think this is the perfect moment to thank everyone properly for the wedding gifts we never received." The room went completely silent. Daniel turned toward me and whispered, "Camila, what are you doing?" I did not answer him. Because for the first time since I married into that family, I was about to speak without asking for permission. You could feel the air change. At first, people thought I was making a sentimental speech. A few smiled politely. Someone clinked a fork against a glass as if to encourage me. I said, "I want to thank those of you who were generous enough to give us cash at the wedding. Especially my cousin Rachel, who gave us $5,000 in an envelope with a handwritten note." Rachel's face lit up for a second, then confusion replaced it. I continued. "The reason I want to thank you publicly is because we never saw most of those gifts." A chair scraped loudly against the floor. Linda's glass froze halfway to her lips. Daniel stepped closer to me and said, "We can talk about this later." I shook my head. Later never came in this family. Things just disappeared and everyone pretended they had never existed. 2 weeks after our honeymoon, Rachel called me asking if we had received her gift. I told her yes, of course, thank you. She went quiet and said that was strange because she watched your mother-in-law collect all the envelopes and put them in her purse before the gifts were moved. There were murmurs now. Real ones. Linda laughed. He said, "Camila, you must be mistaken. I handled the gifts because you were overwhelmed. I was helping. I said that is what I thought too. Until I started calling other guests to double-check addresses for thank you cards and several of them hesitated. One even asked if we had decided to return the money. I let that sink in. Daniel's jaw was tight. He said this is not the time. I said it became the time when my family was called unsophisticated in front of 30 people. Someone from Daniel's side tried to joke that weddings are chaotic. Envelopes get misplaced. Things happen. So I said you are right. Things do happen. Especially when one person insists on locking the gift room and taking the key home. Every head turned to Linda. She finally set her glass down. She said, I do not know what you are implying. I looked at Daniel. I had told him about this months ago. Quietly. At home. I had asked him to talk to her. He told me I was overthinking and that his mother would never do something like that. So I asked him now in front of everyone. Did you ever ask your mother what happened to the envelopes? He did not answer. That was answer enough. Linda straightened her posture and said, this is outrageous. I would never steal from my own son. I said, maybe not from your son. Then I pulled my phone out of my clutch. Because I did not come to that dance floor empty-handed. I opened my email. 3 months ago I requested a copy of the venue's security footage. I told them I was putting together a wedding anniversary video. They were hesitant at first, but I insisted. I paid an extra fee. I did not show the video on a screen. I did not need to. I just held up my phone and said the footage shows the gift table after dinner. It shows Linda asking the coordinator to unlock the storage room. It shows her carrying 2 large bags to her car before we even cut the cake. No one spoke. Linda said that proves nothing. I was securing the gifts. I nodded. That is what I thought too. So I asked the venue manager who signed for removal of property that night. It was not Daniel. It was not me. It was you. I read directly from the email confirmation with her signature attached. The room shifted. People were no longer pretending this was a misunderstanding. Daniel finally said, Mom, did you take the gifts home? She looked at him like he had betrayed her just by asking. Kept going. I did not raise my voice. I did not rush. I wanted every word to land. When I confronted you about the missing envelopes back in August, you told me sometimes people exaggerate their gifts. You said maybe my family wanted attention. My father stood up from his table at that point. I said, Dad, sit down. I have this. Linda's face had changed. The confidence was gone, replaced with calculation. She said, fine. I took the envelopes home to count them properly. There was confusion with the venue staff. I planned to transfer the money to you. I looked at Daniel. Did we ever receive a transfer? He shook his head slowly. Then Linda said something I will never forget. She said, well, some of that money was used for wedding expenses you two were not aware of. And besides, I have a daughter who is starting her life too. Family supports family. There was. She had a daughter from her first marriage. Ava. 22. Still living at home. Linda always said Ava deserved the same start Daniel had. I said, so you redistributed our wedding gifts? She did not answer directly. She said I did what was fair. Ava, who had been silent all evening, suddenly stood up and said, Mom, stop. Everyone looked at her. She said, I told you not to do it. The room felt like it was tilting. Daniel stared at his sister. I lowered my phone. Because this was no longer just about envelopes. This was about a pattern. And I had one more thing to say. Ava looked like she had been holding her breath for months. She said, I told you to give it back. I told you it was wrong. Linda snapped her head toward her. That is enough. But it was not enough. Ava kept going. He said, Mom told me the money was a loan. That Camila's family had already been repaid through the wedding budget. I found the envelopes in her closet. She had opened them all. You could hear people shifting in their seats. No one was pretending anymore. Daniel looked at his mother like he was seeing her clearly for the first time. I said, you told me my family exaggerated their gifts. You implied they lied. Meanwhile, you had already counted every dollar. Linda said, you are twisting this. I said, am I? Then I added something I had not planned to say tonight. After I found out about the envelopes, I hired an accountant to quietly review the wedding invoices. My parents kept insisting they paid more than what Linda claimed. They felt embarrassed even questioning it. The accountant discovered duplicate payments. Vendors who received 2 deposits. One from my parents. One supposedly from Linda's account. Except when we traced it, several of her payments were reversed weeks later. There was an audible gasp from somewhere near the bar. I said my parents transferred $48,000 in total. Linda publicly announced she covered everything. In reality, she covered almost nothing. Linda said, this is absurd. You went through my finances. I said no. I went through ours. Because Daniel and I were billed later for outstanding balances that should have been settled. Daniel's face went pale. He looked at me and said, what balances? I met his eyes. The $10,000 bill from the venue that arrived in September. The one you told me was a bookkeeping error. I paid half of it from my savings. He did not speak. As he remembered. Linda said you are humiliating yourself. I said no. I am done being humiliated. The band members were standing frozen near their instruments. The cake sat untouched behind me. I took a breath. When you said some families are sophisticated and others try, you were right about one thing. My family tries. We try to be honest. We try to respect people. We try not to steal from our own children. Linda's lips parted but nothing came out. Then I turned to Daniel. I said I told you months ago. I asked you to look into it. You told me I was dramatic. You said your mother would never lie. He finally spoke. Why are you doing this here? That question settled everything for me. Because even now his concern was the scene, not the truth. I said I am doing this here because this is where she chose to test me. And because I am tired of fighting this alone. And then I said the part that made the room go completely still. I will not be married into a family where theft is defended and silence is loyalty. Daniel stared at me. Linda whispered you would not dare. I looked at her. Watch me. You could hear the air conditioning humming. That is how quiet it was. Daniel stepped closer to me like he was trying to pull this back into something manageable. He said, Camila, let's go home. We can figure this out privately. Privately. I almost laughed at that word. I said I tried privately. I came to you with bank statements. With screenshots. With questions. You told me I was creating drama. You asked me to apologize to your mother for even suggesting it. A few people at the tables shifted uncomfortably. One of Linda's friends reached for her purse. Daniel said I did not think she would actually take it. I said, but you did not think I was telling the truth either. He opened his mouth, then closed it. Linda finally found her voice. He said, this is how you repay everything I have done for you. I welcomed you into this family. I said you welcomed me into a performance. I turned slightly so everyone could hear me clearly. When the venue sent that $10,000 balance, Daniel told me his mother must have miscalculated. He said she had already contributed so much that it was unfair to question her. I transferred $5,000 from the savings my grandmother left me. The other $5,000 came from my parents again. My dad looked down at his hands. I said tonight was supposed to be my birthday. Instead, it became another reminder that in this family image matters more than integrity. Then I took off my wedding ring. I did not throw it. I did not slam it down. I just placed it on the table beside the cake knife. I said I do not need a husband who confuses loyalty with obedience. And I do not need a mother-in-law who builds her reputation on other people's money. Linda stood up abruptly and said you are overreacting. This is temporary frustration. I said no. This is clarity. Daniel finally said, are you seriously talking about divorce right now? I looked at him. Yes. Because I have been married for a year and I have felt alone the entire time. Someone near the back whispered, oh my God. Ava was crying silently. Not dramatic. Just stunned. Linda tried one last time. She said if there was a misunderstanding about the gifts, we can reimburse you. Reimburse. As if this was a misplaced receipt. I said it was never just about the money. It was about watching you insult my family tonight, knowing exactly what you did at our wedding. Daniel ran a hand through his hair and said you are blowing up our marriage over a mistake. I said no. I am ending it over a pattern. And then I walked off the dance floor. No one stopped me. Behind me I could hear raised voices for the first time all night. But I did not turn around. I expected Daniel to follow me into the parking lot. He did not. I stood outside the country club under those perfectly trimmed trees, heels sinking slightly into the gravel, waiting for something. An apology. An explanation. Anything. Instead, Ava came out. She said I am sorry. I told her she had nothing to apologize for. She looked exhausted. She said this is not the first time. When my dad died there was insurance money. Mom handled everything. I never asked questions. I should have. That was the moment I understood this was bigger than my wedding. Daniel finally came outside 10 minutes later. His tie was loosened. His expression was not angry. It was overwhelmed. He said you blindsided me. I said I warned you. He said I thought we could handle it quietly. I asked him one question. If I had made that comment about your mother tonight, would you have stayed silent? He did not answer. He just said you embarrassed her in front of everyone. There was again. Her embarrassment. Not my humiliation. Not my parents' money. not the lies. I told him I already spoke to a lawyer last month. I needed to understand my options. I did not file anything. I was waiting to see if he would choose us. He stared at me like he had never considered that choice existed. I said, "Tonight you chose." Inside the hall, the music started again. Too loud. Artificially cheerful. I imagined Linda telling her friends that I was unstable, that I came from chaos, that she had tried to help. But the problem with public scenes is that witnesses exist. Half that room heard Ava. They heard about the envelopes. They heard about the duplicate payments. The perfect image Linda had built over decades cracked in under 5 minutes. Daniel asked if there was any way to fix this. I told him fixing it would require something he has never done. Standing up to her without hesitation. Not negotiating. Not softening it. Not asking me to be patient. He did not promise he could. So I said, "Then we are done." I left the ring on the cake table. I left the country club. I left the version of myself that kept trying to earn approval. 2 weeks later, Linda transferred $37,000 into our joint account. No explanation. No apology. I sent it back. Then I filed for divorce. People later told me it was dramatic. That marriages survive worse. Maybe they do. But I would rather be the woman who tries than the one who steals and calls it sophistication.